Up next, the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show with Snowden Bishop. After this message.
Evergreen's calling.
Now that doctors and patients have discovered the many benefits of hemp-derived CBD, Alpine Miracle's nano-emulsion CBD formula is one of the most bioavailable on the market today. It's 100% THC-free, so you can order it online anywhere in the U.S. Order yours today at alpinemiracle.com. Scientists are just beginning to understand its essential role in maintaining optimal health. Get yours today. Use the code REPORTER and receive 10% off. Don't wait. Get it now at alpinemiracle.com. And now, it's time for the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show with Snowden Bishop. Listen in as Snowden interviews cannabis industry pioneers, marijuana experts, policymakers, medical practitioners, patients, and other amazing individuals with compelling stories to share. It all happens right now. Here's the Cannabis Reporter, Snowden Bishop.
Evergreen is calling.
Hi, and welcome back to the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show. I'm your host, Snowden Bishop, and as always, delighted to be here. If you are one of the 3 people left in the United States who still believes hemp makes hippies high, then you might be surprised to learn that nearly every one of our founding fathers believed hemp was a vital necessity for the future prosperity of our nation. And there was really good reason for that. Hemp fiber was a staple commodity used to make everything from textiles, food, and medicine to paper, composites, and fuel. It was bread and butter to early American farmers. There were only a handful of people who saw hemp as a threat, and historians today would agree that they masterminded one of the most artful publicity campaigns in our nation's history to abolish hemp as our primary resource in order to exploit fossil fuels that would transfer the wealth into their own pockets. It was a complete fallacy that has continued to this day. With a handful of special interests that have worked tirelessly to keep hemp illegal in this country, it was actually quite refreshing to hear Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell come out in favor of hemp legislation that's actually pending in the House and Senate. The timing couldn't be more perfect. The revitalization of hemp could actually usher in a new era of economic prosperity. And with April 20th, the de facto cannabis holiday right around the corner, foreshadowing Earth Day on April 22nd, the timing couldn't be more perfect to really bring the conversation into the mainstream. To do that, we have 2 returning guests who happen to be leading the charge to revitalize the American hemp industry. First, let me introduce Michael Bowman. He's the founding chair of the National Hemp Association, and he's been working with policymakers on the upcoming legislation and spearheading the modern Hemp for Victory campaign. Michael, thank you so much for coming back.
Hello, Snowden. It's great to be back.
And I can't wait to hear your news. But first, let me also introduce Greg Flavall, who has been on the show before and is literally building the hemp comeback with his company, Hemp Technologies. He's also starring in the upcoming Hemp Home Build TV series, which is being directed by none other than Hempster's very own Diana Oliver, who made Hempster's Plant the Seed back in the day. Greg, thank you so much for coming back.
Hey, Snowden, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank you. So I'm excited to kind of launch into this. And one of the reasons that I wanted to have both of you on again was because we've got a lot of events coming up around Earth Day and around 420, which, as I said, has sort of become the de facto cannabis holiday in the United States, at least for the cannabis insiders anyway. And also, I want to start talking about the TV series, Greg, that you're working on. But Michael, let's start with you. Can we follow up real quick about the Hemp for Victory campaign? Where is that and how far along is it?
We can. So we're at a very exciting juncture right now. We'll officially launch the campaign later this month, but 2 of our founding sponsors are well in the queue and on their way to making a splash of their own as we approach that day. One of the 2 founding foundation sponsors is New Belgium Brewing. And they announced their Hemperor beer last week in New York City and their support for our campaign. So we have an official beverage of the campaign.
Yahoo!
The beer is made with standard hops and hemp hearts and then terpenes that create a very unique experience in drinking the beer. And it is licensed to be distributed in all 50 states, minus one, so I'm going to say 49 states. Kansas has chosen to opt out of this for some unknown reason.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah. So there always has to be one, right?
Is that Kansas the state or Kansas the city?
Kansas the state.
They still consider CBD even to be illegal in that state, don't they? They haven't passed any kind of legislation as far as I know.
Oh, they do. Yeah, Kansas has been clearly at the back of the pack on this. And interestingly enough, our farm is literally in Colorado's in a stone's throw of Kansas, and we have farmers just over the state line. Literally, you can stand up at the top of our tractor and look east and see Kansas, and they're just beside themselves. They're being shut out of these opportunities. I think there is some hope that maybe there'll be a small movement in this year's legislation, but they have been it's been really slow to come around in the land of Oz.
Oh, I can only imagine. And Greg, you've got some events coming up as well, don't you?
Well, I think Michael and I are actually speaking at a couple of them, and Michael mentioned New Belgium Brewery. They're doing a launch, I think, is it Michael, 19th of April?
Yes, the 19th of April in Encinitas here in California at the Roxy.
Yeah. So Michael's going to be there talking about, obviously hemp legislation and hemp, let's grow hemp for victory. And I'm going to be there talking about hemp building because I love building with hemp.
Oh, yeah. And I'm really convinced that hemp is the future of the building industry, and it needs to be, quite frankly, especially in disaster zones, as we were talking about the last time that you were on the show. Mm-hmm. But one other thing, too, there's a big push, I think, right now going on with the new hemp bill, which I had spoken to Congressman Comer about a while back. Do you have any updates on that, Michael?
We do. So, this is the third time that the Industrial Hemp Farming Act now will have been introduced in the Senate. It was introduced on the 113th, and the 114th, with Senator McConnell as the lead co-sponsor then as well. And it's really just kind of gives you a sense of how far we've come as a country, because 2 years ago, when he was the prime co-sponsor on the last bill, the media didn't pick it up. There wasn't much, there really wasn't much buzz around it. Now it is getting a lot of press, and I think it really just talks to how ready we are to have this discussion nationally. I think we've done the hard work. We spent the last 4 to 5 years promoting this industry, finding ways for entrepreneurs to grow. It's been 5 years now this summer and this June when I wrote the language for 7606 on the Farm Bill, and we've come this far now. We've built an industry really on the back of 7606, and it has accomplished its purpose. We wanted to be able to get this industry with enough of a foothold to show that and demonstrate what it could do, so that we can be making the economic case for this industry. And I think that's where we're at. This plant holds so much promise for the future. And even the Senator McConnell himself said during the press brief that it does hold that potential to be a significant contributor to the agricultural economy. So for me and for hundreds of others of us that have been out there, in this space, each of us doing our part in this, I think it's very gratifying to see that we're at a time now where we now have a Senate companion bill to the House companion. The House bill was filed last July, so it's been sitting there, awaiting its companion in the upper chamber, and now we're set. So let's hope that we can. Our campaign, the Hemp for Victory campaign, will be really keyed in on helping make sure we get the support we need from the grassroots, from the consumers. And this isn't just about farmers and making sure that they can grow it. This is also about making sure consumers, have a choice to have a better product, whether it be food, feed, fuel, fiber, foundations, building materials, whatever it might be. We want the consumers to have to have that choice, and that it comes from this very exciting crop.
Michael, I really like what you've said there about food, fuel, shelter, and jobs. Can I also add maybe world peace? Because this is a whole economy in and of itself.
Something, I have to agree with that. And if you don't mind, Michael, I'll jump in real quick, because
Sure.
One of the things that just strikes me about the hemp movement, and especially with the policy making around hemp, is that this is one of those issues in a sharply divided Congress and sort of dysfunctional Washington that we have right now, that all parties could agree on if they just opened up their mind enough to allow it to happen. And if we could get the special interests out of the way, because I'm still very convinced that it's the special interests that have the ears of some of these legislators who are really preventing any affirmative vote from going through. What's your feeling about that?
Yeah, I think that that happens. I've been in DC enough of over the last 15 years, a good share of that time, to be generally naive and cynical about almost everything now. And I'm a very positive person, so I started from a good spot, and they've jaded me somewhat. But we will have those battles, and we just need to be ready for them. I think what we're seeing today with this youth movement and grassroots movement, that we're all ready for change, and we have tools now to activate the political support, because I think, frankly, we're just done with this nonsense, and we need to get on, and the politicians will either lead, or they will have to get out of the way. Like the old saying, if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. So.
Irrelevance. That's a really good saying, because that couldn't be farther from the truth right now. And we've seen it, from the women's movement to these kids who will not be kids come November. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for change if that's what's desired, especially from this new crop of voters who are coming out. And Greg, I want to bring you back in, so I'll let you take the floor.
Oh, absolutely. No. Thank you for jumping in, because I was saying, this means world peace as well. I mean, for goodness sake, this is a whole economy that we're talking about, from the flowering heads all the way through to the roots of the plant. We are using everything of this plant.
What Greg's saying, Snowden, is in the peace side, and I don't believe Greg's even had a chance to see our logo yet, but we have a logo designed for the campaign by Shepard Fairey, the famed street artist and Obey Clothing and the Obama Hope poster, amongst some of his credits. But the symbol, I'll say, does include the peace dove. When we were, in our conversations with Shepard, as he was trying to, come up with, what this is going to look like, and we talked about, in the case of this campaign, we're the 75th anniversary of the World War II campaign. And that campaign was run by the War Hemp Industries Corporation. But we've got the juxtaposition of war and peace. And I think, to your point, as we're watching these kids, and we understand that we don't have to spend our treasures, both our blood and our youth and our financial treasures, for war anymore. This is, this is an abundant world if we just managed it right and used the right tools that we have. Being this plant, we don't have to do this nonsense. And I think these kids are giving us a little glimpse of how we can change the future, and change it sooner than later.
Hemp, hooray.
That's hilarious. But yeah, well, when you say world peace, that's what made me think of how hemp is one of those things that can bring people together, because it is something that'll solve a lot of the problems. From my perspective, I see, so many issues, economic issues cause a lot of the unrest, and people know that they can have opportunity with hemp. But I think also with the Hemp for Victory, if that's something that can transcend some of the bubbles, because one of the problems we have right now is that so many people go to their own little bubbles to get their news. There are people who are loyalists only to Fox, or people who are loyalists only to MSNBC. For example, and on Facebook, they go to the groups where they hear news that agrees with their point of view. And if the Hemp for Victory campaign can transcend that, it is one of those truly nonpartisan issues that could bring people together to solve some of those extra problems, the lack of jobs or economic woes in some of these cities that have declared bankruptcy 10 times, out in the middle of nowhere.
I think it is a testament to this plan. If you look, when looking back in the 114th Congress, when we had the bills and both the bills, Senate and House version, we had broad bipartisan support. We had Senator McConnell as a prime co-sponsor on the Senate side, along with liberal Ron Wyden, and on the House you had Congressman Jared Polis and Congressman Tom Massey from Kentucky, who are just polar opposites politically, but they agreed on this and got along well on this, and it just, what it really did was demonstrated the utter dysfunction of our political system right now, because we have an issue of which there is broad bipartisan agreement that we should have a fix to this, and still in the last Congress we couldn't get anything done. So I think we're seeing some thawing, I hope, on this issue in this Congress, and the irony is, I think only Nixon could go to China. Only a Texas oil man like George W. Bush could put a renewable fuel standard in place. Maybe this administration is the only one, a teetotaler president can help us end prohibition on a portion of this plant. So I think we've got a lot to be hopeful for. Cautious optimism, but I think we're about there.
While I agree with you, I think that we're going to see this change in our lifetime. And I say our lifetime because I know I'm a few months older than you, mate. But, we are experiencing globally a shortage of lumber. Now, pine, Douglas fir, all these trees, they take 10 to 20 years to grow. We can grow the insulation for a new house in 12 to 14 weeks. And the thing is that, even if we put aside just 1% of agricultural land in this country, we could insulate every new house in this country every year and save these trees. And we use 30% less lumber in our construction principles and practices anyway.
And I think, and I agree. I mean, Greg, and I believe we're going to see this in a short period of time. And if you think back, to 1943, which is just 6 years beyond when the Marijuana Tax Act was put in place, that was a period of time when titans such as Henry Ford envisioned a bioeconomy. We were at a real fork in the road, late 30s and early 40s. He envisioned a bioeconomy, and the titans of the day, steered us toward a hydrocarbon economy. So we've spent, 8 decades clearly creating a lot of prosperity, but a lot of negative externalities with that, and not the least of which is the money we spend on, the Strait of Hormuz and making sure that the fuel line, that the oil lines stay open, and we can one thing imagine a world that would have what we might look like today had we gone down a bioeconomy in a green world. And my grandfather had a great saying about that. There's two great times to plant a tree, 20 years ago and today. Now we're talking about saving them, Greg, but, we can't do anything about what happened in 1937 to 1943 with Henry Ford being derailed and going to that oil-based economy. But we can do something about it today. We know better. Let's do better.
Right. Hear, hear. Hemp, hemp, hooray.
Yay.
Yeah, I know. I'm convinced also that there's potential for hemp actually to mitigate some of the problems that are being caused by that hydrocarbon economy that you're talking about. And one of them, I actually had a great conversation with the founder of Hemp Inc. a few weeks ago. And he's actually in the process right now of developing a product that will replace the petrochemical version of, I forget what he called it, but it's to line the...
It's called lost circulation materials.
Thank you. That's exactly what it is. And, rather than plugging up a hole from fracking that allows gases and oil to seep into our water tables with petrochemicals, now you can do it with a natural substance that's, not going to leach some more toxic material into the water table.
Well, I think I need to step in here because I know a lot about LCMs.
Okay.
And corn has predominantly been the LCM of choice. Now, about 3 years ago, we actually did a study with hemp, cellulose, as an LCM material, and where corn is at about 1,500 psi, and the hemp comes in at 2,600 psi. So it's better helping with those downhole fractures as a lost circulation material. And just to put this into perspective for your listeners, lost circulation materials are used to mitigate and reduce the amount of fluids or drilling fluids that are being lost down a hole when they're drilling for oil. So when they're drilling through granite and sand and rock and yada, 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 they're going to create fissures or cracks that need to be plugged so they're not losing all that drilling fluid for their drilling pipe. And so we did extensive research about 3 or 4 years ago, and I've worked on oil rigs, so that's just why I understand this scenario. Because every drilling rig, of which there are about 5,000 land rigs currently in the United States, need to have, by law, a container of LCMs on site. And most containers are petrochemical-based products. So yes, having a cellulosic LCMs would be better, but they have been using, by preference, corn. But corn is better used as a feedstock, as we all know. It's GMO, Monsanto, et cetera, and we need to get away from that to natural materials. And the hemp has proven, because of its hygroscopicity, to be 60% better than corn as a lost circulation material.
Yeah, and also corn is notorious, especially the corn that's grown for industrial purposes. It's notorious for its glyphosate characters, which is, really not healthy. And I mean, you may know a lot more about this than I do, but it seems to me that one of the biggest complaints about fracking from the environmentalists is the fact that the gaseous materials do wind up contaminating the aquifers underneath the earth. And so, if you're using corn and it does leach these, microscopic chemicals born from the Roundup ready agricultural practices of GMO corn, I would think that hemp grown without those toxic chemicals would be far healthier.
Now you're actually touching on another subject that you may or may not want to record this, Snowden, but we're talking about prescription drugs now that are contaminating our waterways, in which case we can, and as a result, we can't recycle a lot of the water from hotels and so forth because of those contaminants from prescription drugs. Whereas with the top third of the industrial hemp plant, you have medicinal purposes coming into play that is all totally natural.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And yeah, I'm not gonna blank that out at all, because I think that's a very big issue that we do need to address. And what was it today? I forget in which state it was, but I just heard it briefly because I was too busy to sit down and listen to news or read anything other than, my work at hand. And Sanjay Gupta is who I heard talking about it. He was saying that, there's yet another big catastrophe looming in one of the Midwestern states. Just today, the news came out that the water is just too dangerous to drink. There's no safe drinking water within large swath of land. Do you know anything about that?
Well, he might have been. It's possible. I know that there's a specific case for Des Moines and getting their water out of the Coon River, and that is directly related to the agricultural runoff and the runoff from many of the CAFOs and the over application of manure from those CAFOs, and so they're in Iowa two legislative sessions ago, they were being forced to move money out of a state education budget to try to come up with enough money to build, water purification plants in a river that was once pristine. And, so that really goes back to the issue of corn and monoculture and pesticides and what we're doing. We're not only, ruining the drinking water for, cities along these rivers that depend on it, but we're creating a dead zone in the Gulf that's at least the size of Texas the last time we knew, and so we've got to find ways to take this current production model that we have, and change it. And then hemp can certainly be in a bioaccumulator. It has a number of ways to both, kind of clean up what's there, and then create better products, or after we've done the cleanups. We've got some mitigation first, and then some adaptation, with this plant, and we're going to have a long ways to go on that, because frankly, we have federal farm policy and the federal farm bill that effectively keeps everybody doing what they're doing. As I look around at my neighbors and even some members of my own family, it's really hard to extract yourself from this structure that we've set up, under the federal farm bill program for corn farmers, because we have a banking system that requires them to be in that system and enjoying the benefits of the multi-peril crop insurance and the subsidy payments and such. It's just they're trapped in that system, and so just getting this plant descheduled is just the first step of many we have to do. I'm very excited about taking this next step, but we've created this problem, these problems, over multiple decades, and we aren't going to solve them in a year or two.
So Michael,
go ahead.
Can I ask you a question? Do you, with Mitch McConnell's introduction of the new bill to deregulate this plant from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2, et cetera, does that pave the way for some agricultural subsidies for hemp?
Well, there are two things. McConnell's bill will be to completely deschedule the way he announced it, and the bill in the House is to completely deschedule. It will take it. It won't reschedule. It will deschedule, and thus returning it back to an agricultural crop.
Right.
Would open up the possibilities for subsidies, but I think we're an industry that isn't seeking subsidies. I think there are certain safety nets like crop insurance that every farmer is going to need, regardless of whether they're growing Christmas trees or poinsettias or industrial hemp or corn.
Right.
They all need an insurance safety net. But I think the best argument, for this transition of our ag policy that we desperately need, is that we're not at the table seeking subsidies. We want the right to be able to grow and compete, because we know we can. So the subsidy question is not one that comes up, and frankly, I think the pressures on our federal budget over time are going to keep even the current subsidy system, under pressure to ratchet itself back.
One of the things about the subsidy system, which I think most people don't realize, is how much it actually does cost the United States taxpayer. And the only reason that the agricultural community needs the subsidies, from what I understand, from what I've studied on the climate side of things, is the unsustainable farming practices and Monsanto, and that loop of not being able to harvest your own seeds and replant your crops. Instead, you have to buy something from someone else that is really unaffordable for a lot of these farmers. And we've seen it in other countries too, who get hooked into that loop, and they don't have the subsidies that they have in the United States to grow Monsanto's corn. But yet they get looped into it. And once they've started, it's really tough to go backwards and start doing it the sustainable way, because you've already contaminated your soil and that sort of thing. I mean, Michael, you'd know a lot more about this than I do, but I just wonder, when you're talking about the subsidies, if people really understand that it's going to save a lot of taxpayer money to allow hemp to compete, because, they'll be using fewer and fewer subsidies for growing hemp, where, to use for the same things that they're using corn for. Am I on the right track there?
You're absolutely right. And we have a lot of stories to tell, and that is certainly one of them. And sadly, what we have in quote unquote food companies in the United States, running, basically influencing federal policy, were chemical companies that became seed companies that became food companies, which are all designed to make sure we everything in that system has to use their chemicals that are, as part of that. That's why glyphosate has become just so, so widely used in this country. So we've got that, we have that issue, and to your point, the farmers are stuck there. This is about telling our story. And I think as we talked about earlier with these kids and how quick something can change. This feels a lot like, what happened with gay marriage, for instance, when you get to a tipping point and it just happens. Just wake up one day and it's gone. And I think we're getting very close to tipping points on a number of other social issues as well. And I think we're there. We're very close to there. These young kids and those that will be voting for the first time, and those that have maybe just voted for the first time last time or skipped last time because they were just so frustrated with the whole system, have awakened. And I think these young kids are going to help lead us, into the future. And they just have little patience for, I'd say, farm bill policy that gives us what we have right now. Nobody wants that. You can look at the pure data and see the outmigration from rural counties and the places in this country where we have the most incredible natural resources, whether that be soil, wind, the ability to grow biomass, ability to generate renewable electricity, the things that should give us vibrant rural communities, and we have ghost towns. Something is very, very wrong. Anybody who's looking at it, those of us who see this know what the problem is. It's much of it rooted in this farm bill policy. Mm-hmm. So we have got to change this, and we've got to come to I think a new national consensus of what's important to us. Are these rural communities important? Should we be feeding ourselves in a very different way? Should we be generating our energy in a very different way? And how do we make the interior of our country and these rural communities strong again? Hemp plays in so many places in that conversation. And as I see, if I look at my small community and look at the young kids that have come back that are part of some of the grows for hemp for CBD, for example, they're very excited about it. They're coming back because this plant is luring them back because it's full of excitement. They're never going to come back to grow corn or wheat about that, but they will come back and try to figure out how to make hemp work for them and how to make it work for their community. And I think that is really the magic of this plant.
Well, one of the things that's really beautiful about the Hemp for Victory campaign too, when I was speaking with you and Michael Nelson about that, he is from that younger generation. And if you can somehow ingratiate yourself with the youngsters who are just now starting to vote in that age group with Hemp for Victory, I think that we can probably look forward to some, because they're very smart. I mean, these kids that were out there last week, for example, in Washington, the speeches just gave me chills. And you see the passion and how they're really seeing the potential devastation for their own futures if we don't start changing certain things. So, I mean, how focused on the younger generation will you be with Hemp for Victory?
Well, as you know, Micah is a member of our board, and we're going to be very focused on that part of our population, the millennials. We see Micah as a leading voice, the lead voice in this to that millennial community, on this issue and on a number of other issues. But we do believe that, from the bottom up, these kids are key to our success.
Yeah, I would think so. And Greg, I want to get back to you because I learned recently that there were some hemp producers who were looking into supplying hemp to Puerto Rico to help them rebuild. Do you know anything about that?
There are actually several groups that are looking at potentially doing something to help Puerto Rico. They've lost over 70,000 homes down there. But it's really, it comes down to who's really got the money to do it. I mean, there's a lot of talk, and you get devastation like that brings about a lot of interest and a lot of anxiety as to what can be done. But really, it comes down to logistics. Can we get the material there? Is it cost effective, et cetera, et cetera? So, I mean, I'm planning, if I can, I would like to be part of helping to grow hemp down there, helping to process the hemp down there, and then teaching them to build with the hemp down there, as opposed to importing and exporting out of America or anywhere else for that matter. Because, I mean, hemp is a plant that can be grown pretty much anywhere on the planet. I mean, Representative Cynthia Thalen in Hawaii, for example, she spearheaded a trial back there in 1999, and I know Michael knows Cynthia, she's recently done another one with the University of Hawaii. I mean, we can grow hemp pretty much anywhere on the planet. So this is God's given plant to humanity for food, fuel, shelter, and jobs. There's no reason we can't, teach people to grow it down there, take the seeds, grow it, farm it, process it, and then build houses with it.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point to introduce the agricultural aspect of it to a place like that, because I think that a good portion of the cost of embracing hemp when you're doing a build on a home or whatever is the cost of shipping it. I mean, there's just no infrastructure.
I know it's pretty hard when you think about it. It costs a gallon of diesel to transport a gallon of diesel. That's the reality of the petrochemical world that we live in. So, it costs us twice as much for the material to import it into the United States from afar. When we can grow it in the United States, we can save all that diesel fuel and carbon cost even, to have it grown in the United States for processing and utilization in the United States. I mean, there are so many things we can do with it. I mean, just to give you a little ditty, a little side thing that may be irrelevant to you guys, I don't know, but plumbing tape has been around forever. Hemp plumbing tape, right? The plumbers use it to wrap around the threads to put them together for plumbing. And in a little old country like New Zealand with 4 million people, I come from a town of 60,000 people, and the two major plumbing supply houses there, they go through 100 kilograms, which would be 250, 220, 240 pounds of hemp plumbing tape every month.
Wow.
Just imagine utilizing that in America. I mean, the plumbers don't like using Teflon tape. They want to use hemp plumbing tape.
Wow, that would be a great thing to introduce. And, someone who had the wherewithal, the resources to start a business like that could make bank on it.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, there's over 30,000 products, Snowden, that we can make from hemp, from this wonderful plant.
Yeah, without losing trees and without drilling for oil and wrecking the Arctic.
Exactly.
So in January of 13, which was just after Colorado had passed Amendment 64, that really started the dominoes, falling to get us to today. That was really a seminal event. I was interviewed by Juliet Ellerprint at the Washington Post, and my comment to start the article off was, "Can we just stop being stupid?" And that's really where it's 5 years later, we're getting a little less stupid than we were, but let's just stop being stupid. We have all these opportunities, Greg, so we could be growing this in our backyard. We could be creating all of this economic activity, in this country, made right here, and recreating these opportunities in our rural communities. It's there. Once again, it is only failed policy that is keeping us from doing this. We know we have every tool we need to fix this problem if we can just get this bad policy behind us.
Well, and it seems that there are enough people out there who believe so strongly in this that it wouldn't cost the U.S. government anything to just allow the industry to thrive. I mean, if we just get out of our own way, we could really make it happen.
Yes.
That's the bottom line, Snowden. I mean, we have, so many uses for the hemp, and also for our pets and animals, and even production animals. And, hemp has been, we've proven over the years that hemp bedding that comes from the inner woody core of the plant will reduce chicken mortality by 20%, right? we've proven that the seed cake that comes out of processing or cold expeller pressing the seeds for oil will reduce the cholesterol in the eggs that we consume, and they're all organic. I mean, come on, people, let's wake up. Let's get to the voting polls and hemp hooray.
It's a no-brainer. I mean, seriously, it's such a no-brainer, and it's so frustrating to know enough about it to see just how incredibly ridiculous it's been. And, you know, the people who've kept it, the commercial interests and the special interests that have actually gone so far out of their way, spent millions or billions over the last 80 years to try to keep it out of legal commerce. It seems like a crime against humanity, to be honest. But, you know, at this point, we can't really look back on that. All we can do is move forward. And hopefully enough people will begin to understand it. I mean, in my initial opening, I was thinking there are maybe 3 people left who still believe that hemp is going to make hippies high. And and then there are 3 legislators that are being told that they need to convince everybody that hemp will make hippies high and to keep it illegal. And it's just so frustrating.
Yeah,
it is this perpetuation of this. We've institutionalized these lies and the myths over the years. They started out as lies and then became the truth and became myth, and we've and that's why why I think this has been the bureaucracies under this legislation are maybe yet where we'll still have some battles at DEA and until it is descheduled, because we have just institutionalized this the stupidity.
Oh, well, if you tell a lie enough, it becomes someone's truth. And I mean, we see it in politics all day long lately, especially, and the information wars are just astonishing. But you'd think that we've come far enough as a country that people are intelligent enough to be able to make up their mind about it once they hear the truth. But the problem is, whose truth do they believe?
Well, so I'll give you a couple fun examples from Capitol Hill, to that end. 2 summers ago, when we were making rounds, on the previous bill, on the 114th, on the Industrial Hemp Farming Act, I was in the office of a very senior Midwestern senator from a corn state, and he started the conversation in his rebuttal to my statement that we needed to legalize and bring this back, that he didn't believe it was economical, so that there was really no need to legalize it. And to my response was, well, in all due respect, Senator, if economic viability is your benchmark, well, then we better throw corn on Schedule 1, because corn is not a viable, is not a viable crop without your subsidy and your whole system around the subsidization of that. And so it got a little quiet. And then he said, well, where are you going to find all the people to harvest this? It's all hand harvested. There's no way you're going to find the labor for this. And I happened to have my iPhone with me and hit my YouTube button and pulled up the John Deere combine harvesting, in a very mechanized and efficient manner, and in Europe. And this senator has happened to be from a state where John Deere combines might be manufactured. And when I asked him, "Is this mechanized enough for you, Senator?" He had no idea. Absolutely no.
Well, who was it that killed the decorticator back in the early 1940s, late 30s, 1940s, that actually would strip the hemp as it was being harvested, and it just eliminated tons of work later down the road.
Yeah, I've forgotten the name, but that happened just at the kind of on the in the sequence of time with popular mechanics calling hemp the next billion-dollar crop. And they were making that claim because we were just on the purpose of mechanization and decortication, and we were going to be able to produce a lot of product for much cheaper than we had in the past.
You guys are being so diplomatic.
Well, it's not just an online podcast. You have to remember this. We share the airwaves with somebody who might be offended if we really say it like we think it is.
I'm trying to remember that, Snowden.
Exactly. So, well, I'm really eager to hear what happens with the Hemp for Victory, and I'm even more eager to see if we will get the bipartisan camaraderie over the hemp bill. I mean, I really was very surprised to hear our Senate Majority Leader speak out in favor of it. I was pleasantly surprised. And I think with the bipartisanship that's happening around it, I cannot see it failing unless it's some financial reason that's preventing any senator from voting on it. I mean, look what happened here in Arizona when the governor vetoed the hemp bill after our state legislature came together for the first time ever, passed something almost unanimously, and then he vetoed it. And for what? It was the hemp bill here. So
yeah. When we talk about who's going to lose, is it going to be in your case? I think there's a strong case to be made that it was the pharmaceutical companies in that pharmaceutical space in Arizona that were putting a lot of pressure on your governor to veto. We know that these full spectrum products are amazing for our health. I don't know a person around me that's using them that doesn't believe that. We have an endocannabinoid system that's finally once again being fed. So I think that there is and there's and for them, in particular, there's not a lot of money to be made in healthy people, right? So we gotta keep doing what we're doing. So I think the pushback that we'll see may well come from that arena. If we have pushback, it'll come from there, I believe.
I think you're absolutely right about that. I do. And, Greg, I wanted to ask you this because people have been asking me and I don't have an answer for it. But, in these states where hemp is not quite legal, like let's take Kansas, for example, can someone build a house there?
Absolutely. I mean, that's why I asked earlier about whether it was Kansas in Kansas City or Kansas in Missouri, because we did a hemp house late last year in Kansas, Missouri, right in the center of the country. Basically, we did a nice 2,300 square foot hemp house with a family who dad is the pastor at the local church, and mom works for one of the airlines. And they have an epileptic son. And we had turned them on to CBD some months ago, and it's been extremely beneficial and helpful for them. And at the same time, they get all of their friends and relatives and people from the church came over and got involved in putting hemp into the house. And they were all like amazed. It's like, wow, this plant takes 12 to 14 weeks to grow. This is insulating your house. Oh my God. This is wonderful. And so, for us, it's all about education, and pretty much everywhere in the world that we've gone, because we built the first permitted homes in the United States. We designed and built a passive house using local labor and materials in Manitoba for the Ministry of Housing. We've built in Mexico. We built the first houses in Australia, where they get tons of fires, and we've got a fire rating down there for a bush fire attack level, and then in New Zealand, where we get lots of earthquakes, we get about 4,000 tremors a year, and we've passed with flying colors in all of these countries, where it all started with education, with the local municipalities and the councils and the building and safety authorities, to say, listen, this material is non-structural infill. This is the insulation for your house. It's going to reduce your energy costs by at least 3/4. And it's a renewable crop. We can grow this crop in 3 to 4 months. And here we are, without shipping it across the ocean. We have a material that we can insulate all the new homes in your country. And slowly but surely, they are coming on board. And it's all about the education, as Michael will attest to. You educate, teach a man to fish for a life. That's the way it goes.
Right. And then with city permitting and the local law enforcement, when you have container full of hemp crossing the border into a state like Kansas that still thinks that, hemp should be illegal because of the drug aspect of it.
We have no problems importing the hemp right now. There are no tariffs on it. The odd container gets pulled aside for inspection, but that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's just a money grabbing exercise. I had, the first container I imported into New Zealand, I had the customs officials, I had 7 of them, and a brigade come over with their x-ray machine and x-ray 1,000 bags out of a container like I was a drug smuggler. And, after that, clean bill of health, no problem at all. I mean, we've had that occasionally in the United States, but realistically, no, there's no problems with bringing the hemp into any state in the United States. It is. We can't bring bales across the border because they may contain viable seeds at this stage, as Michael could probably attest to. But we can bring the processed herd, which we have in compressed bales, across the Atlantic Ocean into anywhere in the United States, which we are doing now on a consistent basis for chicken bedding, for horse bedding, for building, pet bedding, you name it. So really, we need to be growing this domestically.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I've interviewed 2 of what I would consider anyway, the foremost authorities on cannabis law. One would be Bob Hoban and the other one would be Keith Stroup on 2 separate occasions. And I asked each of them the same exact question because there is still so much confusion in the federal law about this. But when the case against the DEA for importing hemp products into the United States and selling anywhere in the States, that was a federal court that ruled that indeed it's legal to import and sell hemp products anywhere in the United States. And then when they separated out CBD, for example, about a year and a half ago, the DEA registry, they gave CBD, the molecule CBD on its own, a numerical class or a numerical code within Schedule 1, which then, people were all up in arms thinking, oh, well, CBD is now going to be illegal. But there's still so much ambiguity over that because, the federal government is telling you, well, it is illegal. And the Ninth Circuit Court ruling was saying, well, it is perfectly legal. But then some will tell you, like Keith Stroup said to me, that's only in the Ninth Circuit states where that's perfectly legal. But what about the states and the other circuits? So I think until we sort that out in this piece of legislation and that's currently on the table in the Senate and in the House as well, that should clear it up. I mean, if they can just deschedule hemp, then we won't have any of these issues.
That is correct, and I think to the end of where we're seeing this part of this go mainstream again. I meant to mention it earlier, Snowden. I don't know if you had a chance. I happened to watch Bull. That's one of the few things I do watch on TV. And on this Tuesday night on CBS, the entire episode was about a court case of a mother with a mother who was a doctor who had a child with leukemia, and then she had patients. And they all lived in a non-legal state, and she had her son was using the CBD oil and was having a marvelous response, much like we would have seen with any of the kids that Sanjay Gupta has done stories on, and so she went to another to a legal state and brought it home, and the federal government brought in the big guns from the assistant U.S. attorney, and they were going to put her in jail for 30 years, and at the end she was exonerated. By the jury, and I thought they did a really good job. There's only a couple little things I would have done differently, but I think someone who doesn't dig down to the weeds as much as I wouldn't have caught it. But I think we now have this entering into the realm of standard broadcast media on a weeknight where they're talking about this, and the job they did was just showing the absurdity of this law. And how and why would we sit there having a federal government trying to put this woman in prison for 20 years when she's just trying to heal people? It was a great episode, and I was thrilled to see that we're now having these kind of conversations in nightly shows like that.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I did see that. And it just drove home some of the problems that people have had. Like there's a mother in Utah, for example, who had Child Protective Services show up at her doorstep because her daughter was being given CBD and they threatened to take her child away and they still won't pass any laws. And it was just such a nightmare for her. And I can only imagine this is happening in all of the states that haven't passed anything yet, where the lack of education. So yeah, I'm really happy to see it's going into sort of these mainstream TV shows. And, I think a tipping point was when Sanjay Gupta did Weed on CNN, that series. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of that kind of programming. It does hit people who don't automatically go out and look for that information.
Watching The Bull, I thought, when we'll really win this game is when I have Betty White bringing back the old Golden Girls, and they're using CBD, and then
I know.
Betty White I'm convinced Betty White is the key to this. I got to get to Betty.
Invite her to come to one of the episodes, Greg. And speaking of television, Greg, what's the next step for your home building?
It's the HTTV reality hemp build series, I think. Whatever Diana's got it named as. But it's pretty fun. We were up in Canada for the first episode. We were in Portland, Oregon for a tiny house. We were in Northern California for a roundhouse that we did with some people up there that escaped the fires. And we were over in Missouri, as I said, with the pastor and the hempster over there. And we've got several more episodes lined up to do for our reality show. And it's all about spreading the word and teaching people, you build with hemp. And we're happy to educate and regenerate. Let's go. Hemp, hemp, hooray.
Hemp, hemp, hooray. I'm with you on that one. Well, we'll keep everyone posted on the progress, because I know that you're looking for a network home right now. So that, I think, is going to be around the corner. And once that's solidified, then you'll probably just be off and running. So it's very exciting.
Yes, it is. Congratulations, mate.
Yeah.
Thanks, mate.
Congratulations. Absolutely. So anyway, well, I'm grateful to have had this conversation with both of you, and we will do it again. And Michael, you're still planning on joining me for the Hemp panel in Pittsburgh for the World Medical Cannabis Conference and Expo in April?
I have it in my calendar.
Fantastic.
When is that?
It's April, the weekend of April 15th.
Okay.
And I'll post information about that up on our website as well. But it's called, if anybody's interested in looking it up, it's called the World Medical Cannabis Conference and Expo. And it's in Pittsburgh, which is becoming quite progressive on this topic, actually. And last year was the first year they had their medical cannabis law. And I think that they're working on some hemp legislation, if I'm not mistaken. So it should be pretty interesting. And then the NOCO Hemp Festival or Hemp Conference.
No, that's coming up next week.
So will both of you be there?
We will.
We will. Yes.
Fantastic. And speaking?
Yeah. I'm not sure they could take two of us in the same place.
Oh.
Yeah, but Michael, they will.
But no doubt we'll be talking again soon. And, please feel free to send me any updates. And so once again, it's time to bring another show to the close. If you'd like to learn more about what Michael Bowman and Greg Flavall are doing, please visit us online at thecannabisreporter.com and click podcast to find today's episode. And there you will find their bios and links to their websites and other updates. So we have so many people to thank. First and foremost, I'd like to thank our sponsors, HealthTerra, Alpine Miracle, and Compassionate Certification Centers. We certainly could not be doing this without you. I'd also like to thank Eric Goodall, the composer of our beautiful theme song, Evergreen, and our producers at our new studio, DigiLabs. So thank you again, guys, for making us shine. And last but not least, thanks to all of you for listening. I'm Snowden Bishop, inviting you to join us again next week, same time, same place, for another episode of the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show. Until we meet again, Be safe, stay informed, share what you've learned, and make it a great day.
Evergreen's calling. Evergreen's
Join us at the World Medical Cannabis Conference and Expo at the Pittsburgh David L. Lawrence Convention Center, April 12th through the 14th, and meet investors, networkers, new products, and professional athletes. Ex-NHL star Philadelphia Flyers Riley Cote, Super Bowl champion Marvin Washington, and more. Register today for early bird pricing at cccregister.com or by calling 888-316-9085. Again, that's cccregister.com or 888-316-9085. Presented by Compassionate Certification Centers.